Welcome to the Tracker Group audio briefing. This summary is authored by Planet Tracker and presented with AI narration. It distills key insights for investors, policymakers, and financial decision makers wherever you are. Today I'm summarizing Planet Tracker's report, PFAS, from non-stick to stuck in court. The report examines PFAS, a large group of synthetic chemicals used across sectors, from chemicals and firefighting foams to textiles, packaging, and electronics. Drawing on legal precedents, regulatory analysis, a new PFAS litigation risk dashboard, and 2 company case studies, the report aims to help investors identify PFAS-related risks they may be exposed to. The core message is clear. PFAS should now be treated as a material financial risk factor, not simply as a technical environmental issue. Planet Tracker highlights how PFAS exposure can affect cash flows, earnings quality, valuations, balance sheets, and credit profiles, and in some cases can lead to severe financial distress. Why does this matter now? First, litigation is expanding rapidly. PFAS litigation has become one of the largest environmental mass torts in US history, with more than 15,000 active lawsuits grouped in federal court as of January 2026. Second, regulation is tightening across the United States, Europe, and the UK, increasing the likelihood of remediation costs, compliance costs, enforcement action, and cost recovery claims. Third, corporate disclosure is often still too limited for investors to judge whether current provisions are adequate. The financial scale is already significant. The report highlights major settlements including 3M's $10.3 billion agreement over water system claims, a combined $1.185 billion settlement involving DuPont, Chemours, and Corteva, a $750 million Tyco fire product settlement, and a $316.5 million BASF settlement. In Europe, litigation is at an earlier stage, but the report points to a clear increase in class actions, criminal rulings such as the conviction of former Miteni executives in Italy, compensation claims, and municipal recovery efforts. A contribution of the report is Planet Tracker's PFAS litigation risk dashboard. It scores around 1,000 listed central companies and some 5,300 associated facilities based on what they do, where they operate, and how exposed surrounding communities are. The model combines legal case data, regulatory records, independent estimates of PFAS pollution and exposure, and corporate disclosures to generate comparable risk scores across sectors and geographies. Rather than predicting specific lawsuits, it maps relative exposure and hotspots, helping investors screen portfolios and navigate PFAS-related risk. The findings suggest that PFAS risk is widespread across listed companies, but highly concentrated in certain groups and locations. Just over half of the companies scored in the dashboard fall into the high-risk band, and roughly 1/3 of all high-risk facilities sit within just 20 parent companies. The report also shows that risk is not limited to upstream manufacturers. Downstream users, including branded consumer companies, can still face substantial local liabilities where PFAS use has contributed to contamination, litigation, or reputational damage. It also emphasizes that PFAS risk is spatial. Litigation tends to intensify where production, waste handling, or product use intersects with populated areas and vulnerable water sources. For a financial audience, that matters because site-level exposure can translate into larger claimant pools, more costly remediation obligations, and a greater likelihood of mass claims or public authority cost recovery. The report includes 2 case studies that illustrate how financial materiality can arise at different points in the value chain. The first is Chemours, an upstream producer with extensive PFAS-related manufacturing exposure. Planet Tracker assigns Chemours a composite litigation risk score of 4.5 out of 5, one of the highest in the dashboard universe. The report estimates that Chemours has booked roughly $1.1 billion of PFAS-related litigation charges since 2019, equivalent to around 1/6 of its current enterprise value and a sizable share of its net debt. With these claims material relative to its EBITDA, underscoring that PFAS has already been financially material for the company. The second case study is Wolverine Worldwide, a downstream company that did not manufacture PFAS, but used PFAS-containing treatments in footwear production. Its overall composite score is lower, at 3.0, but the report still finds material financial exposure. Known settlements and related PFAS costs are estimated at roughly $160 to $170 million, and the report notes that this is significant relative to Wolverine's financial scale, amounting to around 7 to 11% of recent enterprise value, with long-term remediation obligations still in place. Taken together, these case studies are important because they show two different routes to financial materiality. For upstream companies, the risk may come from direct production, legacy contamination, and broad multi-jurisdictional litigation. For downstream companies, the risk may be more localized, but still financially meaningful once litigation, remediation, product scrutiny, and supply chain governance failures are taken into account. For investors, banks, insurers, and other financial actors, three calls to action stand out from the report. First, demand better disclosure. Ask companies to map PFAS use, identify contaminated sites, disclose provisions, and explain how liability estimates are being developed and updated with facility-level transparency, where exposure is often concentrated in a relatively small number of sites. Second, integrate PFAS explicitly into financial analysis. By building liabilities into valuation, credit analysis, scenario testing, and stewardship priorities. By testing whether provisions are sufficient, CAPEX supports transition away from PFAS-dependent business models and insurance assumptions remain realistic. Third, use engagement and voting to push for credible transition plans, including clear, time-bound phase-out strategies where feasible, stronger governance, remediation planning, and capital allocation that reduces rather than extends PFAS dependence, with executive incentives aligned to risk reduction. This summary covers only the essentials. To truly grasp the scale of this issue and to access the detailed analysis behind these findings, download and read the full report from Planet Tracker's research page. It set out the legal and regulatory context, explains the methodology behind the PFAS litigation risk dashboard, and provides the full case study analysis that underpins the assessment of financial materiality. Thank you for listening.